REMRacers! This is a lore video and review for REMRacers, the new racing game by Corvus Belli. Now, I'm not really a board game review channel. I am no shut up and sit down, although I did meet Quentin Smith at a convention once, and I even got a hug from him after suffering a serious head wound which has had consequences on my life for the past year. I'm also not a VR review channel, and that didn't stop me from inexplicably making a video about Vader Immortal. And with that kind of confidence, why shouldn't I do board games? Most board game reviews would be pretty to the point where they explain the rules and say what they think, but I'm a freak, so instead you're going to get that blended with a bunch of backstory and lore and all that stuff. Like a cooking show about soul food, where the chef is a professor who has tricked you into learning about the remnants of Native American tribes and how they introduced stuff like corn and hominy into the African American culinary tradition. And then they use that as a springboard to explain that Native Americans, contrary to stereotypical belief, did not live in harmony with nature, but were engineers in their own right. Let's take a look at my favorite cookbook, the Greenwood Encyclopedia of Daily Life. That's going to be volume 4, 17th and 8th. So you play as hacker pilots controlling remotes on a racetrack. So the first thing you'll do is you'll set up the board. You can set it up however you want. There are some pre-designed tracks, but the book also just straight up says, do whatever you want. Then you give each player a remote and their matching control unit, and then you'll give them each a pilot and their matching control card. So pretty easy so far. Each pilot has an ability that can be used once per lap. Every remote has slightly different stats. The pilots and remotes don't always match up lore-wise, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. Every round, you figure out initiative order. Whoever is farthest ahead goes first, determined by sector. Sectors are tiles. It's a bit confusingly written, to be honest, because if there are 2 or more remotes on a tile, whoever's more inward on a track actually goes first, or if there's a straightaway, whoever is further back and there's a tie, you roll off. But it's fine. It's fine. It's actually fine. So that's turn order. On your turn, it's very simple. You choose a movement stick and you place it down. If your template overlaps with other players, you move as far as you can, then you bump them. You put down this very cute little template here, and then you roll a die to see where they go. A 9, so you're going like right here. If your template has you hitting a wall, you crash. At that point, you flip a card over from the deck, and you use that to determine effects. The icons for these are kind of small, too small. However, there is a nice reference guide for all the icons, and it's pretty easy to take a look, so it's not hard to remember what everything is, and the negative effects are usually interesting enough. It could be something like discard a card, or it could be damage, or it could be your steering is shot and then you can't steer properly, or it could be the check engine light, which it means nothing. There's no effect with the check engine light. Just like real life, you keep driving and you'll deal with it later. This leads to the game's core strength. It's funny. It's genuinely funny. I played it 4 times with 3 different groups, and I was laughing all 3 times. Simple. Not the little ha ha ha, I'm enjoying myself, but real, genuine, I'm having a good time laughs. Knocking into other remotes and getting thrown around, it's silly, it's good. 2 players sharing 1 brain cell and going completely straight forward and ramming each other multiple turns in a row, which did happen, by the way. That's funny. That's good stuff. I like that. I like that about it. The movement tools are hard to use, which is actually good because it means that you'll be bumping into the sides and the other remotes constantly. I don't think that they are truly useless. I'm exaggerating if you get that sense, but they're hard to use, and yeah, it's good. They get you to where the game is supposed to be, which is chaotic fun. The deck also can be used as take that cards, which includes stuff like weapons, the old Infinity flamethrower, and also hacking programs. You've got a bunch of weapons like the nano pulsar. You've got you can cause an oil leak. That's kind of fun. You can drop down proximity mines, stuff like that. You draw one every single time you are transferring sectors. So you go from here to here. That's a new sector change, so you would draw a card. And also, whenever you would start the round in last place, you would also draw a card from the deck. You have a max hand size of 3, and that fills up very fast. You usually just play a card on your turn if you can. That's what most of them do, is on your turn you play this card. And the majority of them are basically, take that cards. That's fine. There are a couple of more cute ones like copy somebody else's movement, and I like those more. Infinity players will quickly recognize a lot of the weapons and items. Aside from the names being a little foreign if you don't play the game, the font is not perfect. Check out DA ammunition, which is not going to make any sense if you don't know it's double action ammo. One friend thought it was Dr. Ammunition, which, by the way, is a good name and someone should steal that. The game's infinity roots are definitely not a deal breaker or anything. If you're worried about taking this to a casual night or playing with your family, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's fine. It's not a problem. If you don't know what a Feuerbach is, are you going to know what the hell is going on with this card? I guess you'll probably just think, hey, it's some sort of big launcher. Since it's listed as an HMC Feuerbach, I'm not even really sure. Whatever. It definitely seems like some stuff, say kinetic rifle, was adjusted to feel less infinity, which is good and fine, but maybe not as much as they could have. You know, it's that weird in between. Like, they call the BTS stat BP instead, which is maybe a joke about British Petroleum, but probably not. These are nitpicks, though. These are really nitpicks. Because is the game fun? Yeah. I said it was funny, and I meant it. I think a lot about board games and board game collecting. There's a constant back and forth thesis and an antithesis in board game discussions about what it's like to have a big collection. Should you have a huge stable of games, or should you have a small and carefully manicured selection? I don't have an answer for that, but I do think it's valuable to have a board game that can fit in different styles and goals of play. Social deduction games activate one part of your economic Euro games activate a different part of your brain. But it's very rare to see a game that's like, you really play with the toys, and you're using stuff like this, which is very physical. It's nice because it activates a part of the brain that most board games don't. War games do it sometimes, oftentimes, with movement and templates and ranges and estimation. But you know, it's nice to see a board game trying that out. Very few board games have manicured measuring tools like this. This is a very complete game as is, but I could see a world where they sell an expansion. Maybe more pieces and tiles, you know? Maybe more item cards, maybe more remotes, or more hacker cards. I don't really care about any of that. The game seems pretty complete as is. The game is absolutely complete. The game doesn't really need any fancy upgrades. There are no metal coins to purchase, no hard plastic tokens. It's perfectly lovely as is. Some final thoughts. The components are good overall. The tracks are actually very pretty. You get a large number of them. I'm just got a very small layout here so you can kind of see everything on camera. The tracks have a nice variety. You get some sharp turns, you get a hairpin turn, you get just some squiggly doos. You know, the miniatures are good. They're all hard plastic. They are not to the same scale as Infinity. They could have probably sold them larger, but then the board would be much, much larger, and then the models would be more expensive, and I don't think that was really in the cards. It's fine. I'm not gonna bother painting these just because they're color-coded already and they're cute, and the designs have quite a lot of personality in my opinion, but I see no reason to bother painting them personally. So overall, the components are fine. The game itself is genuinely funny, it's quick, it engages parts of your brain that most games don't. The only other criticism I have, and I'm not sure if this is just my millennial ADHD, is that I played the first 2 times on a much larger board, a far larger track than what you see here, and it got kind of boring after the first lap. It did kick back into gear once we got towards the end of the 3rd lap, but balance-wise it's a little annoying because, geez, you know, the pilot cards, they have once per lap abilities that refresh when you finish a lap, so I didn't want to mess with the balance too much. Whatever, these are all small nitpicks, right? They're the things that you think about after you're done playing, but in the moment, I was having a ball. REMRacers is fun. It's very, very funny. It's the most Mario Kart I've seen in a board game, more so than the actual Mario Kart board game, probably because that is a Monopoly reskin. I can't tell you for sure that this game needs to be in your collection, or if you even care about curating a collection, you might not. You can tell that this started off as a fan game for a different property because it combines a bunch of bits and bobs, you know, the intellectual property, the movement tiles, the miniatures, and it combines existing stuff together to make something new and also fun. And like a lot of fan games and mods, it's a little jank, it's not the most deep, so I had my nitpicks. But if I'm gonna keep gloobs in my collection, and I am, I'm absolutely gonna keep REMRacers around. Yeah, I like it a lot. REMRacers gets my highest possible score. Good. So, in REMRacers, you play as REMRacers. This has nothing to do with REM sleep and everything to do with drones. Unmanned vehicles called remotes are commonplace in the universe of Infinity, and they exist for militaristic purposes as well as recreation. Players of the Infinity wargame probably own several. I own a bunch. They're kinda cute. Remotes are controlled by something called a ghost. That's an intelligence, either resident within the machine as a limited artificial intelligence, or as something else using remote presence technology to operate the little fella from a distance. If it's the former, the remote has an onboard artificial limited intelligence or ally. They may instead have just a complex suite of programs that govern the behavior rather than any kind of true intelligence. If it's the latter remote presence technology, then it's being operated by a hacker pilot. Any authorized user can do this when they're up close, taking direct control to operate it with a bit more nuance than a machine might. In older editions of Infinity, you actually needed either a hacker or tag to take remotes. You basically required some network infrastructure, a bit of a tax on the otherwise super cheap little fellas. That didn't necessarily mean that they were controlling the remotes though. No, you usually have someone controlling it from far away. Professional militaries might have a fancy VR suite, a big virtual sensorium that immerses the user, giving them a lot more situational awareness, but they probably look like a big idiot to anyone trying to use the VR in person. A few individuals can ghost, as in the verb ghosting, directly into a remote. They put their shut, their mind and personality, into one of the little fellas. Post-humans, geists, allies, and AI aspects can shunt themselves into a remote very quickly. The sport of remote racing, or REM racing, goes back a really long time. In my setting overview video, I even make reference to the REMRacers. The sport itself sounds intense. Remotes speed through the air, space, and ground with various levels of professionalism and also varying rules. It's most popular in Pan-Oceania and the Nomad Nation, though. The former because they're a bunch of technophiles, and the latter because they're petty people. There are REM racing leagues across the human sphere, but there are also lots of illegal leagues. Much like the poorly titled Race Wars in the Fast and the Furious,
Welcome to Race Wars. Good, next one.
The Mars Underground Circuit is popular in part because it is illegal, and therefore cool. Underground circuits use banned biofeedback technology to link their nervous systems directly to the fate of their drones. Deaths are common. This blood sport became so popular on the Nomad Arachne network that it started to encroach on legal drone racing revenue in Pan-Oceania. In response, the Pan-Oceanian military-industrial complex was ordered to shutter the Mars Underground Circuit. This police action got complicated quickly, as its enforcement ended up extending to Eugene-controlled territories on Mars and causing outcry among other O-12 members. It was also largely ineffective because they're still doing new seasons of the Mars Underground Circuit. It looks awesome. It's more popular than ever. However, most people enjoy the legal races because they still have guns and violence and explosions, but they're family-friendly, relatively speaking. The human sphere has quite a few opportunities for those who like going fast. The Spes archipelago on Neoterra, for instance, settled by South Asians, Spes is unusual for Neoterra in that its people were allowed to spread out across the archipelago rather than being confined to cities. Its biosphere was much more robust than the rest of the planet, and able to absorb the human habitation much better. Firozabad is the largest city on Spes, and it sounds like something out of F-Zero. Huge towers, organic and curving highways, and big green spaces. It's home to the Surya Motor Speedway, which seems to be the biggest hub in the sphere when it comes to speed. It's a huge, configurable, multi-track stadium that's used for recreational racing. It's got rotating sections, and even wacky mid-race changes. REMRacers is set at some point after the arrival of the tohaa, since we have Gasil as a pilot. I'm guessing it takes place before the ceasefire and end song, otherwise we get a Morat pilot or something. The fact that this game was delayed a few times makes me assume it was supposed to come out in maybe 2020 at the start of 4th edition in its lore. I don't know, whatever. Let's talk about pilots, remotes, and Easter eggs. First up is Charles W. McQueen. The only place Charles shows up last is to an interview. He's a bad boy with a heart of gold, who loves a rough scrum, and I love his vibe. Check out his shirt. It's a jersey for the Castropol Lobisomen, and it has NDBL written on the chest. National Dronebot League? Castropol is a town in northern Spain, not too far from the region of Galicia, home of Corvus Belli and some wild hats. In the human sphere, Castropol is notable as a major settlement in the Tartary region of Dawn. It's a fishing city, home to the Eastern Fleet and a major source of fish and food for much of the Ariadnan state. Castropol is a city where life revolves around the sea. What you can get from it, what you do when you're out in the blue. For example, the Irmandino Brotherhood, who use the sea as a part of a renowned smuggling network. Irmandinos are descended from Galician Spanish scientists, who arrived on the original colony ship, and the town has a distinct character. Low, squat houses, charming bars, and black markets everywhere. Also, the Lobisoman racing team is a reference to this Brazilian werewolf pig thing. So Charles McQueen, he's got a VR rig in his hands and a bad boy attitude. My kind of guy. Second is Dale Gasil, nicknamed Gas. This very much reminds me of actor Vin Diesel, or as he's known in Europe, Vincent Petroleum. Gas is a tohaa racer. Not a lot of tohaa hackers. You walk into a weird vibe. A big black blob of slime falls from the ceiling, and a naked dude crawls out. And then he's like, "Hey, it's me, Gas. You have some questions about my job as a rem racer. This is normal." Gas seems to be sponsored by EXO, Startetco, and Ypsilon Motors. Just for fun digression, EXO is a biotech firm. They employ only the most educated engineers, but if you can manage to get hired, it's just a pittance to get modified yourself. Useful since EXO has a long rivalry with Bayhan contractors. Startetco is a pan-oceanian construction firm. They are a very prestigious group with a sterling reputation. Their projects are consistent, reliable, and carefully overseen by the Zimmerman family. Finally, Ypsilon Motors is a pan-oceanian motor company also based in Svalarema. They're one of the largest producers of land and sea vehicles in human space, and they are attempting to rapidly expand. A recent partnership with EXO allows them to both promote their new releases at huge conventions and open fairs. Kristina Yagami. Her vibe is perfectionist. Any suitor to her private box will describe it as perfectly manicured, harmonious, and exceedingly well planned. And that's her vibe on the track too. Perfect planning, supreme results. I don't have much more than that to say. I like her art. It's cute. Nurazubi is a young rem racer. She is among the most popular and personable pilots you'll ever find, and the lines outside her fan box are very, very long. She has a bright smile and kind words for every fan. Her line, "I'm a fan of everyone." Her VR cockpit is filled with fan art and gifts and dedications from other competitors and friends. She's the tops. Nurazubi races for Bashair Velocity and is sponsored by companies like Pharmacorp, EXO, and Keller Resources Group. For reference, Keller is a private military contractor based out of the US Ariadnan city of Riverside. Riverside is a pretty small city. It's densely packed and organized to withstand assault. It is the financial and political capital of the state of Washington, and widely considered the second city of US Ariadna. Keller Resources is the largest private military contractor operating in US Ariadna, having broken into Aristea sponsorships as well by sponsoring Moonchild's debut. Olga Stolyarova is an ace. She races for Team Voltage, and she's repeatedly brought the Nomad team to the #1 position with panache and precision. Her aesthetic is distinctly retro, complete with some nostalgic video game sleeves. She goes so far as to wire archaic gaming consoles up to be her control suite. She likes the difficulty. She likes it arbitrary and demanding. She'd probably use a Nintendo Power Glove if the cheap rubber hadn't disintegrated over 200 years. She's like the final boss of rem racing. I'm a huge fan. Otto is usually ghosting in his remote companion 808, or Bob. That means if you try to talk to him, you'll be met with one of two automated routines, either drowsy and uncommunicative, since, he's mentally training, or contemplative and assertive, if he is competing. Both can be a bit unsettling. Otto appears to be an Aleph aspect. His Los body is covered in corporate imagery, all of them Aristea sponsors. That includes Techion PSN, a Eugene business consultancy firm. They only work with the best. Note also Shangmei Products. They're one of the most well-known brands in the sphere. They make consumer products and they have an extremely catchy jingle. They started out just working on cheap food, sweet and salty snacks, but they grew and grew until they were making luxury perfume, clothing, makeup, containers, and much more. Their headquarters on the Neon Lotus orbital rotates above Mars. They offer everything you didn't even know you needed. Zhu Jihang. She's pretty, she's busy, and she's genuine. She's an old hat when it comes to rem racing. Jihang spends as much time doing PR and tours as she does training for the actual race. She loves to gossip, she loves to be friendly and personable, and she has a perfect memory. And more than anything, she loves it when people ask her when she's going to retire, so she can answer with a sly smile and just say, soon, TM. Jihang is sponsored by Xiangmei Consumer Products and Techian. Notice the big Neon Lotus logo on her waist too. I don't recognize this logo. If anyone does, let me know, and maybe I'll send you some kind of miniature prize. Lastly, she's sponsored by Gangte Industries, best known for making the maglev train featured way back in the 2nd edition train heist. The download's available below. Second to last is Photon. Photon never takes off his helmet, as is tradition for all of the champions of the Lightspeed racing team. Everyone on Lightspeed wears helmets to press conferences and go only by nicknames. Photon, though, is something else. He's on a fast track, surpassing all the records of even the team's founder, Joko Acosta. Perhaps most notable are Photon's sponsors. There's the aforementioned Ariadne PMC, Keller. There's TCOM, a massive communications megacorp. There's the Hospital Bank, and, most notable, Magna Obra. We've discussed Magna Obra on this channel before. In a world of unethical practices, Magna Obra manages to sink to new lows. They absolutely revel in their bad publicity. It's almost as if the truth is even worse. So being considered mere scumbags is an improvement over whatever devil's bargains they concoct. Magna Obra started out in supply and research, but now they focus on advertising, marketing, and social engineering. They're the ultimate middleman. They do PR campaigns for big clients, and if you've got power, they can get you whatever you want. Fame, love, or promotion, Magna Obra gets it done, and they shroud themselves in endless layers of more middlemen. Their consistent hiring of the Druz Bayram security is an open secret. The rumor that they control the Equinox terrorist group is a bit less substantiated. Whatever bizarre practices they engage in their surreal corporate villages, that's the real stuff. If you want to hear more about these corporations, by the way, make sure to leave me a comment and let me know which, if any, you want to learn about. Finally, there's Agnes. You may know her as the pilot of the Defiance shuttle from the board game Infinity Defiance. Originally, she had no miniature, but a fan campaign ended up with a sculpt and a Kickstarter update celebrating the Pray for Agnes campaign. So, REMRacer Agnes Guerrong Ferreira. According to Corvus Belli, it follows the Portuguese style of placing the maternal surname first, then the paternal surname. Her mother, Luisa Guerrong, was a notable air ambulance pilot. She spent long hours in a remote pilot booth. There are many wonderful things about growing up in Pan-Oceania, and especially the planet Acontecimento. Education is not one of them. The multiplanetary empire outsources education to numerous self-directed learning courses. All of them are carefully studied and approved by the Ministry of Culture. But they're not as motivating, and they're a far cry from the in-person classrooms of the 21st century. Agnes much preferred getting her hands dirty to endless self-study on MayaNet. She reprogrammed remotes, modified them with stun weaponry, and eventually turned to racing. Remote racing was fun, and the winnings covered her church tithe and plenty more. Agnes might have been a farm kid, but she was a happy one. In her later adolescence, Agnes heard words that would mark her for life. She was at a Sunday Mass when she heard a quote from Pope Calixto IV. Something like, "To be in the grace of God is to be as the same as a pilot who always flies in friendly skies." It was actually a paraphrase of a bad marketing slogan, but it was cool and it stuck with her. Agnes wanted to fly. This was easier said than done. She really wanted to join the Pan-Oceania Armada, but the Academy wanted good grades, something that she lacked after spending so much time in extracurriculars like, illegal rem racing. But there were other options. Atmospheric squadrons were less exciting than space combat, but they had lower entry requirements. Agnes became a fighter pilot, volunteered for combat, and was promptly sent to Paradiso. She was a damn good pilot too, even if it wasn't the same as space combat. She wanted to go past the wild blue yonder, up to the stars. Eventually, she transferred to the Pan-Oceanian Armada as a shuttle pilot, which meant she could leverage her skills as an atmospheric fighter pilot. They appreciated her skills and steady hands, and she smashed their expectations. This deeply Christian farm girl from Acontecimiento wowed the staff, earning her the long-sought-after Officer Wings. Captain Ferreira earned a sterling reputation performing combat around the Acheron blockade. Her specialty remained infiltration and extraction, with her most renowned operations being the evacuation of the Frossen Bucht Port settlement on Svalarema. She was able to save the lives of hundreds of colonists despite a hellish storm, performing 4 emergency extractions in a rickety shuttle. It was this act that brought her to the attention of Project Inanna, where she ended up as a pilot of the Stalker, the Defiance rapid insertion shuttle. And now that she's back in the human sphere, she's rem racing once again, just like you could be if you pick up REMRacers. This is the end of the video. I genuinely enjoyed REMRacers, and I genuinely enjoyed making this video. I'm back. I hope to make many, many more this year, and I'm going to try and enjoy every minute of it. Thank you so much for watching.